Well, hello again. Pastor Ray Barnett here. Glad you could be with me for another edition of God's Answers for Anxiety and Depression. I want to wish all of you a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on what time you're watching this broadcast. Today is Monday, August the 17th already. Year is beyond half over. Hard to imagine. But another beautiful day. A little mix of sun and clouds. But so far so good here with the weather so far. So I guess we should be okay. Alright. I want to share with you something I mentioned in Friday's broadcast, Friday's lesson, which has to do with the muscles of the body. And specifically, I want to share with you how they educate the brain. Now, ordinarily, we think from the top down. The brain educates the muscles. The brain does so many things, which obviously it does. When it comes, though, to educating the brain, and I may say, in certain areas of our lives, the muscles are one of the main educators of the brain. For instance, we could look at the eyes, and of course we get an education. The brain gets an education by what we see, and then we look at that and we make interpretations which may be correct, may not be correct. What we hear, all right, another sense. And we hear things, and again we make an interpretation, or we and we can judge that as being correct, and maybe it's not. And you get the idea. There's all these different senses in the body. And the brain begins to formulate ideas. What is not well known, or at least I should say, what in my opinion is not recognized as much or accented as much about the education of the brain, is the place that muscles play. Now, this is today's lesson is, again, a very important one. So try to pay attention and try to absorb the information. If you need to rewatch this broadcast, then do it, because for those of you who are now, and there's quite a few of you who regularly watch this broadcast, I can see you're making progress from what you write. And so in any case, just these concepts, these principles of overcoming anxiety and depression, again, as I mentioned last week, they have to be practiced, but obviously first they have to be understood before they can be practiced. Okay, so I'm talking to you today about how the muscles educate the brain, the part that they play. And we'll start with something simple, a very easy illustration. Here in front of me is a hot stove. I reach forth my arm all the way down to the hand. I touch one of the ranges which are on, and immediately sensation of pain goes up the nerves, up through the nervous system to the brain. It registers as pain. Signal comes back down through the nervous system, and then the muscles retract. Now, it may be perhaps in your mind a debatable issue. Is it the nerves that are educating the brain or the muscles? But without me trying to pull that all apart, let me just stay on point by saying it was the muscles that reached out. It was the muscles first that touched the hot range. up the nervous system to the brain pain. Now, you should already know by now, as we've gone over this, and we will continue to go over these things, certain principles again and again and again, that when these muscles, right, think of all the muscles in the body. If you have any background in anatomy, you'll realize the body has so many muscles, right, over 200. And they do all kinds of wonderful things, really. I mean, the body is just such a great creation. I loved when I studied anatomy and physiology. I actually went out and bought extra books from the class I was taking when I was in radiology in X-ray school. Anyway, the muscles, they move in different directions and they do things. And so when we come down to the subject of anxiety and depression, remember this main principle. So these muscles are tense and they put pressure on the nervous system. It's the muscles that are tense that put pressure on the nervous system, that sends a signal to the brain. Danger. These muscles can be so tense, they affect the internal organs. As signals go down from the brain to the nervous system, or through the nervous system, it can affect other organs, the heart, the lungs, and so on. All from that one word idiom, danger. And again, I remind you that you're not going to hear the word danger. It's going to come to you in some form of ideology. I'm losing my mind. I'm having a heart attack. This is unbearable. All right, that's a thought. That's an ideology. Think of it. The fact that you have diagnosed yourself and you have registered an opinion on that diagnosis, this is unbearable, does not mean that that is true. Fact is, most nervous symptoms are not unbearable. They're just not born correctly or bore correctly. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, about muscles. So, having established tension in the body, muscles being tense, putting pressure on the nervous system, things begin to misfire. Danger hits your brain, but not in a word danger. It comes in phrases or it comes in ideas. Heart attack, losing the mind. Those are all ideas, but there's only one common denominator in them all, and that's the word danger. We eliminate danger from the brain by an act of the will. I'm rehearsing, or I should say I'm reviewing past lessons. And we begin to detach that you're not in any danger. So that's a major step in making progress against your nervous symptoms. Now, once we do that, the tension in the body is not released because the body has built up habits and the brain has built up habits as well. So we fall into the lesson I covered, I think, last week on a resolute will to overcome a brain that's in the state of defeat. Okay, let that register for a second. When you begin to panic, and I'm going to talk about depression today as well, but when you begin to panic, you have in the mind, okay, and I haven't yet gone through the difference between the mind and the brain, but you have formed in your mind an opinion which is keeping you in a type of bondage or a state of defeat. So the brain, all right, I'll go back to the brain. So the brain is registering not only danger but defeat, and then you give in to your symptoms, and you take it from there. Now, the part that the muscles can play in aiding the brain that's in a state of defeat or defeatism, the part that the muscles can play in aiding the brain that has got the signal of danger going on. First, we make a resolute decision to detach danger. That's done with the mind. But then the muscles play a huge part. See, when we talk about bad habits, the muscles, I mentioned to you about muscle memory. I believe I mentioned to you, but I better say it again just in case I didn't. I believe I mentioned to you the studies have been done over the last few decades that have discovered, scientists have discovered, specifically neurology, the branch of science known as neurology and neurologists, they have discovered what they call now little brains throughout the body. They're in the skeletal muscles, they're in the gut, they're in the heart, where it has the same function as the central management up here. And they can communicate back and forth, right? We always thought of well, for centuries, right? We thought of it's just this, and that's how it goes. But now science has proven that muscles actually do have memory because they have little brains in them, and you can do, research that for yourself. It's pretty fascinating. So the muscles have a capacity to think like central management up here, and send back information to the brain. If it's a bad habit, bad habits have been developed, then we have this vicious cycle. This muscles, let's say, we'll stick with the muscles. Muscles are telling the brain, yeah, and the brain is saying, and you get this, and you start to spin out of control. But let me go over for a minute to depression. With anxiety, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, I've already told you about the power of stillness. See, I'm sitting in a chair here. I'm not moving a whole lot. But if I was practicing calming my body down, which I do frequently every day, throughout the day, I wouldn't be moving anything at all. Nothing. Let me get that kind of a picture. But let me shift over to depression to make the point about how muscles can educate the brain. All right, so it's established the brain is in a state of defeatism. It has accepted the thought of danger. Your body has become, with depression, let's say your body has become inert. You're not moving, or not moving much. You shuffle around the floor. You shuffle across the floor around the house. Don't want to get out of bed. There are cases, and perhaps you may be one of them, where you've slept 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 hours a day. It's not unusual with depression as it gets worse, or if it's a bad condition. And no matter how much you sleep, you never feel relieved. Why is that? Think about it. I have, and I told you this before, something about myself. My workouts throughout my life I always made them intense. They were always exceptionally difficult to do. If I was running, I'd pick all the hills. I would pick up, when I was running and I was younger, I used to pick up boulders and run with a boulder. Anything to make it hard and difficult, training my mind all the time, training my will to never give in, never give up. That was part of it. And when the brain is in a state of defeatism, well, it's not going to do that. So, speaking on depression in specifically, you're laying around sluggish. Your muscles feel tired. What I wanted to say about the exercise, when you have actually exercised your muscles with a marathon, or you do maybe, or people do hard labor, and you're really working hard. Most times you come home, you got a ravishing appetite. You look healthy, except for the moment when you're tired. And you go and you take that shower, and by the time you hit the rack, well, you're looking forward to it. And when you get up in the morning, you feel refreshed. Well, that's how muscles will feel when they have been properly exercised and now given the rest. Why then is it with depression that no matter how much you sit around, no matter how much you sleep, and most times the sleep is not quality either, that you don't feel refreshed? Why is that? Well, it's because here, this is very important. The fatigue that you have is a feeling of fatigue. It's not real fatigue. Real fatigue is when you're exercising again in an intense manner, and the body just says, "Whew, that's enough." And you agree, and you say that, yeah, that's all I can take. That's just enough. See, that's real exhaustion. But depression produces a feeling, and the key word here is feeling, of exhaustion. And a lot of that has to do with the brain in this state of defeatism. All right, what part does the muscles play? So your doctor, your counselor has instructed you to do as I've said before. Get outside. Get into the sunlight. Get some vitamin D going. Change the scenery. Meet some people. But if you're depressed, that's the last thing. You don't want to talk to people. You don't want to see people. You don't want to be around people. You don't want to go out. So you go from the bedroom to the bathroom, maybe to the kitchen, to the living room. And for many people, I want to say women, but many people, doing chores is really torture. Just washing the dishes is an effort, a colossal effort. Cleaning the house. If you venture out, as I guess most do, everything just takes so much effort. And always keep in mind that I'm not just sitting here as a spectator dictating to you, what the facts are. I've experienced this. I know what you're feeling. At least I know what I felt during seasons of depression, and that's everything that I've described so far was it. However, over the years, I knew enough to make myself keep moving. And that's the part that the muscles play in educating the brain. If you have some experience with depression and you have actually put into practice going out for a walk, going out to the stores, going out to dinner, going out with friends, you've learned that, hey, you really did feel somewhat better. But then you get back to the house, and whatever has caused your depression, then it just comes back on you again, and kind of living that life, which is really bondage. But if you think long enough, I did have a respite from my depression when I was out with my friends. I did have respite when I went out for that walk. In my case, I don't run any longer because of my knees and my age now. But I do work out every single day, other than Sundays, every day. And once the gyms open up again here in New York, I'll be back in the gym first day they open. Why? Well, because it always made me feel better. Even when I'm feeling good, it still makes me feel better. It's something that I've just done, and see my muscles. Here's the point. In my own exercise routines that I've had over the years, the muscles have educated the brain that if you do this, you're going to feel better. So what I'm trying to convey to you is that the brain didn't educate the muscles. The muscles educated the brain. Move those feet. That's an act of the will. Move those feet. Walk that 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, whatever. Ride that bike. Or if let's say it's the housework which has been neglected. You get up and start cleaning. You get up and just start moving the muscles. And as you move the muscles, and maybe not initially, okay? Like everything else I'm talking about, practice. You got to practice this. And maybe not initially. But in a fairly short manner of time, you're going to educate the brain that the body is not actually tired. And again, I always say this to you, that's ruling out that there's not something organically wrong, or in this case, chemically wrong, which I know what you're going to say is the fact that, well, I've been to my doctor and he says there's a chemical imbalance. Okay, so we let it go with that. But you can still move your muscles and re-educate the brain. And as you do, chemistry starts to change. We all know about stress hormones. cortisol and other things that are released at times when they shouldn't be released, and so you feel the effect of fatigue, or you feel the effect on the other side of anxiety. You feel the effect of the fight or flight syndrome, discovered by Dr. Walter Cannon in Harvard many years ago. And the body's ready for action, but since there's nothing going on and you don't expend the energy, you get this feeling of fatigue based on some real physiological principles of the body. But the fact is that you haven't done anything, so it can't be a real fatigue. Back on depression. And so you move your muscles. And again, you go for that walk. You get up, and if you're an exercise individual like myself, then you do those weight training, or you do the aerobic class that you're in, or you use the free weights and you go out and do it. Anything. Cleaning the house. And this is this act of the will we've talked about before, then starts to educate the brain, because the muscles are moving. And the brain is here, central management, this brain here. The brain is starting to learn that feeling of, I can't move today, I'm just too tired. Now the brain is saying, wait a second, we're moving over here, because the muscles are doing the action. Now a signal is sent to the brain saying, no, I guess we can move. And so you start. Now, like everything else, the more you practice that. Now, realize with depression as well as anxiety, there's a lot more involved. That's why I keep telling you that you have to stick with me on a daily basis, because what do I do? 4 or 5 hour shows? I mean, that's not going to work out. And most of the information would be forgotten anyway. So we do them in little 25-minute segments. The muscles are now educating the brain, or let's say even re-educating the brain. And the brain is starting to say, wait a second, we can actually move. And then you got the right, let me keep it simple, you got the right chemistry going on in the brain. You got endorphins, which, by the way, the word endorphin is actually spelled phene, P-H-I-N-E, as you would have in morphine. Right? If you've ever had morphine, I've had it, you know that it takes care of your pain, pretty much. And endorphins, well, that's how we pronounce it, right? We don't say endorphine. Endorphins have the same characteristic as morphine. It's a painkiller. That's why the runner's high, the so-called runner's high, well, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from chemicals that are naturally in the body. That as you move and exercise and so on, clean the house, drive a car, whatever, you're moving the muscles. You're actually releasing some endorphins that have the same type of chemical properties as morphine and other pain relief, and also the feeling of, again, the runner's high is a euphoria. And that's after you cross a certain line in the exercise. The brain is getting re-educated. So today what I wanted you to learn, and I guess we'll have to carry this on a little bit more, is that the muscles educate the brain as much as the brain educates the muscles. And in our case, with anxiety and depression, the muscles are now going to become one of the chief educators of the brain. Through an act of the will, we begin to move our muscles against how the body is feeling. Now these muscles are going to take over for the defeatist brain, or the defeatist ideas that are in the brain. Muscles are going to now take over, just the way, somebody would take over the wheel if something happened to the driver. Right? You're in the passenger seat, so you take over the wheel. They're going to become they're just going to be taking over. Muscles are going to start to take over, re-educate the brain, and we're on our way once again to freedom from anxiety and from depression. So let me pray for you today, and we'll more than likely be carrying this on this week a little further, so that you get the concept and then you can start to practice it. Again, don't expect it to be easy. The deeper you are in a depression, or the deeper you are in anxiety and panic and all of that, you're going to have to tough it out and do it. Father, I just ask you to touch each of my friends who are watching this broadcast today and help them to learn this lesson through practice, that the muscles can re-educate the brain by an act of the will and walking out against the feelings of fatigue or the feelings of fear, whatever it may be, and walk out against it by an act of the will. And give all of my friends today watching complete serenity and complete peace. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right, that's enough for today. Like I said, I thinking that, remember, I don't sit here with notes. I just do this ad hoc. I do pray as to what should I talk about today, and when something just comes to my mind, because there's so many lessons and they're not in any real certain order, I just go with it. If you'd like to be with me on a regular basis, just subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button. And Lord willing, I'll be with you here again tomorrow on God's answers for anxiety and depression. Thanks for being with me, and I'll see you tomorrow.